I feel like I haven't been up here in ages. Probably has been a little while. I mean, when you go from every day to like less than every day, because a lot of times I'd be going to Longs. Now, you know what? Who cares? About a year ago, maybe sooner than that, I did a video about Brian Wilson and how they were parading him around the country under the false premise of a tour, you know, a performance, and you know, the tickets cost money. You know, people paying for these tickets to go see Brian Wilson, and what they were doing is basically sitting him on stage behind a piano that he's supposed to be playing. They're you know, they're trying to create the illusion that he's playing the piano. The keys are facing the drummer. Like, he has, all you're seeing is the front of the piano with him facing straight, which is, you know, I know they did it to try to hide the fact that he's not playing, but what happens is he's just sitting there staring at the audience. There were some shows where they had him on the side, but it seemed like they were more concerned with hiding the fact that he wasn't playing than making him comfortable. So a lot of these performances, he's just staring at the audience and occasionally falling asleep, just like closing his eyes. And you know how old people sleep? They just like sit there in place and kind of put their head down, and then like out of nowhere he'd come awake and start singing with the song. Not, you know, not always the right part or the right place really, but he would start performing like, oh, I'm on stage, you know, he's like probably had a flashback or something. And they did this for a while. They're currently doing this kind of thing with Frankie Valli. He's up and walking around, but he's falling asleep standing up. And you know, it's just gross. Like, and there are always people that, that's what they want to do. Is it though? Is that what they wanted to do? Like, if you went to Brian in his 20s and was like, hey man, what do you think about this? Or if it was someone else, some other artist he likes, you know, and would he think, gee, that's how I want to spend my final years? Like, people would say Weekend at Bernie's is a joke, and but this is really fucking Weekend at Bernie's. They were dragging him around and just stare at the audience, occasionally mouth the words to a song and fall asleep. I was like fucking outraged by this. I mean, Frankie Valli, he's a great talent. He had a lot of great music, but you know, that's one thing. But to do it to Brian Wilson, man. But then it just goes to, it feeds into my theory about Brian Wilson, him being punished and humiliated for that period of time in the 60s when he was connecting with God and putting it on tape. What he was creating there, you know, you listen to Pet Sounds and it fucking sounds like heaven. You know, and he always talked about how important God was, and would always, he was always representing, as the kids say, the kids of 40 years ago. But he was, yeah, I think that I think he was taken off the board and punished for doing some of that stuff. For what? Because they know what music does, they know what the notes do, they understand how the frequencies work. That's why all modern music, and it's gotten this way over time, is just more and more created to pull you down, to change your vibrational frequency. You know, they I forget what the tuning was. After World War II, they made music what is it? I forget the hertz. They made everything be tuned down to this frequency that's not compatible with human beings, and they made that the standard tuning. And there's a whole thing about it. There's smarter people can explain it to you. Well, musicians can explain it to you. Just because I spend my life in bands doesn't mean I'm a musician. But yeah, that I never bought that whole thing. Like, oh, he just did too much acid, and it just, he was never the same again. I don't know about that. You know, I mean, it does the same. That was a Sid Barrett excuse. Something was going on with him too. You know, because I've read interviews with Sid Barrett from that time, and he was saying things like, "They're after me," or he kept talking about how they're trying to get him. Sid Barrett, I'm saying, when you went to visit him, he's very paranoid. He had people check the door, and they just say, "Oh, he did too much acid." I've done a lot of acid. I've done a lot of fucking hallucinogenic drugs. I did ketamine a bunch, and I don't know. Does it like, can it do that to you where you're just retarded for the rest of your life? I don't know. I don't think you can. It doesn't seem like, you know, it only happens to some people. I know a lot of people who do a lot of drugs, and, you know, I don't know anybody that we think about like, oh, have you seen Gary? Yeah, he's just never been the same since, you know, he used to do all that acid in high school, and, you know, now he walks on his pajamas every day. It just doesn't happen. You know, I don't think that's how drugs work. It's just how they have, like when they used to try to depict marijuana on TV shows, and they would have someone smoke weed and then like hallucinate that they're on a fucking unicorn flying over a rainbow. It's like, that's nothing to do with it. I wish I'd be fucking smoking it right now. But yeah, it's they did something to him, and he always had a handler. Famously, that Landy guy was just always feeding him drugs. It kept him drooling, siphoning money from his publishing. He was just, it felt to me like he was being punished. So I think what this was is just an extension of his punishment for communicating with God. He's called his forthcoming album, right after Pet Sounds, the one that they put the kibosh on. It was supposed to be called Smile, and he said it was a teenage symphony to God. And that's when he lost his mind, quote unquote. And the album never got made. They made a different album in its place that was just it was, I mean, I like the one in its place, but it was like this really lo-fi. It kind of felt sort of thrown together. It had a single that him and Mike did, as Mike and Brian. You know, it was Mike and Brian was the name of their act, and they had a single called Getting Hungry. They put that on it. It just seemed tacked together. And it had really rudimentary versions of some of the songs that were going to be on Smile. Now, in the years that followed, we've all heard the album, Smile. In the following years after it didn't come out, he would release songs from the project onto Beach Boys albums. It was always the best song on every album. You know, Surf's Up, Until I Die. What else is on there? Cabin Essence, Child is a Father of Man. There's some real mind-blowing stuff. But, I mean, and we've heard recreations of the album. I think Capitol actually released an official version of it, which is pretty much taking recordings from then and piecing them together as good as they could to make a facsimile of what it would have been. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, you can't really do that. That is when, you know, he quote unquote lost his mind. I'll be right back. Hang on a second. Yeah, he was doing stuff that really hadn't been done melodically and arrangement wise. a lot of his influences were harmony bands, the Four Freshmen, Jan and Dean. But he was taking it into this really creative direction. Like he said he could like hear and see music. Like he would see it and then know what the notes are. Had a really weird way of explaining things. And there was this, those videos where like black people listen to classic rock. There's like this whole subgenre on YouTube where like black people listen to white music basically, like, and they never heard it before, like Talking Heads or whatever. And then they also have like young people who hadn't listened to it, and they had this producer, a white guy, was his just Gen Z producer is what they call him. So he makes shit. I mean, he might be good. He might be a talented kid, but if it's modern music, it's fucking not. Let's be real here. It's fucking auto-tuned, fucking soulless, low vibrational bullshit. Probably, But he was listening to Pet Sounds for the first time. He had never heard it before. And he's listening to it, and he's just like blown away. Not like just, wow, this is really good, but more like, what? He's like looking at the screen like, all right, what? They did another tempo change, another key change. It's just what he was reacting to really was the decisions that were being made melodically and in an arrangement sense were just really different. It's not something you heard a lot after, and certainly not anything you heard before. The Beatles famously kind of nicked a lot of stuff from his mind, but I think they got nervous about him wanting to connect. He didn't want to, but the possibility of him being able to connect young people to God. Like everything in this world, every social issue, every political issue can always be broken down to God and the devil. And the battle between them, of the devil always trying to take you away from God. He can't beat God. He's lost. He knows he lost the fight. So the remaining time we have here, however long this fucking shit show goes on for, is all about Satan trying to diminish you spiritually or keep you from going home to God. He knows he's going to the pit. So he wants to take down as many people as he can with him. And everything, every single problem in this world can be broken down to Satan wanting to get you away from God, to separate God from his children. He, like I said, he knows he can't win. So he wants to try to get as many slivers of his child from rejoining with him to diminish, his progeny, us, in some way. And I think that's what happened there. And Brian Wilson is just one example of that kind of seeing that thing play out. But to me, it's pretty blatant, and he never made stuff like that again. That genius and that inspired and that divine. He made good stuff since, but the best music that he came out with was stuff that he had written prior to his freak out, his drug-induced freak out that just ruined him for the rest of his life. He's fucked himself up on LSD. The guy lived into his 80s, and he was always a bit kind of weird because he was always on medication. They had him medicated so he couldn't think clearly about anything. That was to keep him from ever possibly trying to open a gateway to God in some way on this realm. They had to get rid of him. I don't know why they didn't just have him knocked off like like his brother Dennis. I don't know what the thing is with keeping him around. Maybe there was a business kind of thing to it, ownership of the music. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. There were people profiting from him. Obviously, people say his wife Melinda was pretty Sharon Osbourne-y, you know, in his final days. I don't know. I don't know about any of that. I just know that when I see him, when I see a Brian Wilson gig from 2 years ago, he's perched at his piano, just blankly staring when he's not sleeping. That is evil. That's absolute evil. This is a man that figured out a way to contact the divine through music and was trying to strengthen that connection with the music he was making. And going back to that Gen Z producer, he was just like, he was just blown away, you know, trying to make sense of what was going on. He had never heard anything like that. He had never heard anything like that. Hey, what's going on, buddy? I got no signal on me today. Hey, there you go. You're ready to go. Have a good day, sweetie. You know, he was just like holding his head, like, what the fuck? He didn't say fuck. He's not a potty mouth like I am. But yeah, he was, and you know, rightfully so. It's just weird, like, because to find people that have never heard, like, the Beach Boys to me seems so strange, but when I think about it, like, I'm 5? I'll be 55 this month. I was born on June 29th, 1971. That should make me 55. I'm always confused about my birthday. I'm always like a year ahead. But yeah, so, I mean, his heyday was like a century ago. It's like someone in the 80s talking about like how Rasputin was a good piano player. Like, oh man, Rasputin was great. It's like it's so far away from any relevance or cultural footprint. Now, on the other hand, there is a lot of documentaries and stories about him and shows about him. But, you know, if you're a Zoomer, you're a younger person, you're not watching Lifetime. You know, you might have heard his name. You might have heard the name Beach Boys. But, like, this guy, he knew who they were, but he had never heard them. And it was just, it was fun watching him react to it. I'll link the video if you want to check it out. But he seems like he knows what he's talking about. Like, he's definitely a theory guy, you know, like I can tell when there's a key change, but I can't tell you what the key is. Like, this guy can, you know, and yeah, and it made me just think about Brian and his music. Like, I grew up with that stuff, you know, my parents were into them, and I always thought they were lame until I got a little bit older and actually listened to the shit, and then it was like, holy shit, you know, because I got into it through the legend of Brian Wilson, like this guy that went crazy, and you know, he made all these great albums, and so after a while I got curious, you know, maybe in my 20s, you know, when you start kind of, I'm always looking for new kinds of music and new kinds of bands. I'm always finding new things to get into, but it's usually from the past. It's rare there's like an actual new band. You're like, well, what thing have I been into? Oh, I've been listening to Neil Young stuff, the old Neil Young albums, stuff I just didn't have time for before, you know. So I'll rediscover stuff like that. So I listen to music, but it's all from that era, like from my kind of, you know, my era. So yeah, I bet a lot of Zoomers have never heard the fucking Beach Boys. And when you hear something like God Only Knows, it's just like, well, you have to contend with that. You know what I mean? Or Good Vibrations. Like, you think of it, you know, if you do know the song, it's like you think of like a Sunkiss commercial and like people playing volleyball on the beach. But the song itself is fucking crazy. Like, it's crazy. Like he was saying too at the front, like, no one who thinks of this. You know, the way you put certain things together run up against each other. Brian, he would like almost create these pieces by themselves and then kind of tie them together. I mean, a lot of bands did that. A lot of prog rock bands were doing that kind of thing. They'd have an extra part and they'd tack it on. Some Genesis would do that stuff a lot. But he was like Brian was a master of it, you know. It was one of those things where, like, you know, you'd see him in these behind the scenes things, even recreations, and he's walking around doing in the studio with all these musicians, like, so focused, telling them exactly the part they gotta play and what it is, and it just sounds kind of goofy. Like, what the fuck is he doing here with this French horn? Never mind the stuff where he like has sound effects. It's Paul McCartney came in during the making of Smile, and you say, "Oh, cool, we'll have Paul do something, maybe sing or I don't know." He's Paul McCartney, you know. He had him do sound effects of taking a bag of vegetables and taking them out and breaking them, snapping them in half. That was what they had Paul McCartney do. He was a funny guy. He wasn't trying to, you know, make a joke of the whole thing, but this is Brian. He'd hear these things in his head and do them, you know, these odd things. And he was always like known as just a mad kind of genius, much to the chagrin of his cousin Mike Love, who always felt like he was overshadowed by Brian, and he was. You know, Mike did a lot. He had a lot of great contributions too, and it certainly wouldn't have been what it was without him. And I definitely appreciate Mike, probably more than a lot of people. But you know, you got a Mozart, Beethoven kind of character with you. You have to realize he's got to get some attention, you know. And yeah, that mystique and that story is what drove me to finally listening to them. And once I started listening to them, it was like, oh, I gotta know all this shit. And for me, the real story of the stuff I'm interested in is Pet Sounds and everything after. Before Pet Sounds, it's all sun, fun, surfing, racing cars. It's stuff immaculately produced, geniusly put together, like, of course, but it's not my sensibility. You know, I have a hard time listening to that stuff. It's not, you know, I'm a little bit too young for that, which is pretty amazing because there's not much I'm too young for. But yeah, the late 60s, early 70s period, albums like Friends, 2020, Sunflower, Holland, that's my shit. Even Call of the Passions. And during those albums, Brian had minimal input, you know, but they're still great. He would show up and do something. He was always contributing songs, or he'd do a vocal, but it was all still in the wheelhouse. A lot of times he'd be producing, and his work output started to pick up steam in the mid-70s. They brought him back to the band, excuse me, on a regular basis, and they made a big publicity thing out of it. It's called Brian's Back marketing campaign, which was incredibly crass and kind of sad. But some funny stuff came out of it. He was on Saturday Night Live, and Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi go to his house to try to get him out of his bed. The bed he famously claims to have spent years in after the failure of Smile and the breakdown of his relationship with the Beach Boys. As it worked, it didn't really break down. He just stopped getting involved with them. His brothers are very talented as well, though. I mean, runs in the family. Carl, especially, he sounds a lot like Brian. And so does Dennis. Dennis got a little bit more of a raspy thing going on. But yeah, those late 60s, early 70s albums are fantastic. But then he came back full-time in the 70s, started touring with them. And you got Brian Wilson, right? So they're like, all right, Brian, the next album we do is going to be all you. You can write it, produce it, all you. And they came, the band released the album Loves You. So when you read it, it's like Beach Boys Loves You. Brian wrote all the songs, produced all the songs, and it's fucking weird. I like it, you know, just because it's so weird, but it's not really anything that would have fit into the contemporary scene then, or the sort of nostalgia, fun and fun stuff. The reason their career kind of got an uptick in the mid-70s is because of, I almost said physical graffiti. Physical graffiti. George Lucas's American Graffiti came out, and it was a big hit, and it featured 50s and 60s kind of music, and that reignited people's love for the Beach Boys. They then released the Greatest Hits album, which topped the charts in a lot of countries, and you know, and through that they brought Brian back and installed him as the de facto leader once again. And the Loves You album was just too weird, and it's very lo-fi. Like it almost sounds like an indie rock album or something. Ahead of its time. For sure. A lot of the stuff that's on it predated, the sounds predated stuff that would come years later, even like in like a new wave kind of way. There's a lot of stuff on that album that later on people would do stuff similar, if not taken, you know, directly from it, but it presaged, I think that's the word you want, similar things. He was always kind of ahead of the curve all the time, especially, you know, in the early days too. Once he got away from doing the Sun and car stuff, he was doing like pop music that was just kind of sophisticated and about stuff. You know, it wasn't just meaningless lyrics. He was really ahead of his time, and an amazingly talented guy. And it's fucking, it's sad that he's gone, kinda. I mean, I don't know. Of course, I mean, what am I saying? Of course it's sad that he's gone, but when someone like that dies and they're in their 80s and people kind of make a big deal about it, like they're surprised, or you know, they use the word like a stunning loss or something. It's like, well, no, the guy, you know, he's very old, you know. The fact that he died isn't really a great surprise. So he lived a long life. I don't know if it was good. He seemed to have blown too close to the sun with the Lord in a world that promotes the satanic and the evil. And he was going way too off the script. He became dangerous to them. So I think, you know, for daring to do some of the stuff he did, and I mean, I don't know if he was looking at it that way, but they certainly looked at it that way. They lobotomized him, gave him the handler, and then just his life's been kind of a slow motion humiliation ever since. It's sad. But yeah, he's there won't be another like him. There wasn't one like him when he was there. He could connect with God and put it in music and then record it so that you could hear it. Absolutely, that's what he did. And yeah, he's with the Lord now. So Beach Boys loves you. We love the Beach Boys. Thanks for stopping by. Till next time, don't blame the teacher. Blame the school.